Welcome to the deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're stepping into the boxing ring,
Okay.
but not to watch a fight.
Right.
We're going to explore the history of boxing fatalities.
Yeah.
You've given us 10 tragic matches spanning from the bare knuckle era
Mm-hmm.
to today, and we're going to uncover how these events changed the sport.
It is a fascinating and somber journey,
Yeah.
looking at how boxing grappled with its own inherent dangers.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting in 1894.
Okay.
The image of bare knuckle boxing is brutal enough.
Yeah.
But this fight between Andy Bowen and George Kid Levine is almost unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
They fought for over 7 hours.
It is mind-boggling to imagine 110 rounds.
Wow.
Especially when today's matches are usually capped at 12.
Right.
Sadly, Bowen died the next day from his injuries.
Oh, wow.
This era, with minimal rules, had other tragedies, like the 1896 fight,
Okay.
where Henry Wharton died after an 18th round knockout.
So these early deaths were a wake-up call, right? Did they immediately lead to reform?
They certainly started the conversation.
Okay. These fights pushed for formal rules,
Okay?
gloves, and limits on fight durations.
Mm-hmm.
But the journey to a safer sport
Yeah.
wasn't straightforward.
It makes you wonder if some inherent risks just can't be eliminated.
Right.
So let's jump to 1930
Oh, okay.
and the fight between Frankie Campbell and Max Baer.
Mm-hmm.
This one seemed to change how the media talked about boxing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This fight was heavily covered by the media, and when Campbell tragically died,
Yeah.
the narrative focused on Baer as a killer.
Interesting.
This portrayal fueled public anxieties about boxing's brutality,
Right.
going beyond just the rules to the fighters themselves.
That's a really good point. It shifted the focus to the human cost of the sport.
Yeah.
But for real widespread debate and reform, I think we have to look at the 1962 fight
Okay.
between Benny Parrott and Emil Griffiths.
The Griffith-Parrott fight was monumental
Yeah.
for several reasons. It was televised nationally,
Wow.
bringing the raw violence into people's homes.
Right into their living rooms. Parrott tragically died 10 days after the fight from a brain hemorrhage,
Oh, gosh.
sparking massive controversy and calls for change.
It's a tragic story made even more complex by the homophobic taunts.
Yeah.
Parrott directed at Griffith before the fight.
You're right.
Yeah.
That added a whole other layer to the tragedy
Yeah.
and further fueled the debate surrounding the fight.
Right.
It forced people to confront not just the physical dangers, but also the social issues within the sport.
The calls for tighter regulations after this fight must have been huge.
They were.
Did they result in any lasting changes?
This fight led to significant changes,
Right.
pushing for stricter safety regulations,
Mm-hmm.
mandatory pre-fight medical evaluations,
Okay.
and greater emphasis on the referee's role in protecting fighters.
Right.
It was a turning point in how the boxing world and society at large
Yeah.
viewed fighter safety.
But even with these changes, the tragedies continued, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
The 1989 death of David Moore,
Okay.
after his fight with Javier Rodriguez, showed that even with evolving safety measures,
Yeah.
boxing remained inherently dangerous.
It's fascinating how boxing seems to be in this constant struggle
Yeah.
between the drive to make it safer
Yeah.
and the fundamental nature of the sport.
It's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
Boxing is inherently about inflicting blows.
Right.
And that makes it incredibly hard, if not impossible,
Yeah.
to eliminate risk entirely.
Let's talk about these safety measures in more detail.
Okay.
You mentioned gloves earlier.
Right.
How did those evolve over time?
So early gloves were little more than padded mittens
Okay.
meant to protect the fighter's hands rather than reduce the force of blows.
Interesting.
Over time, gloves became more standardized and padded
Okay.
with different weights for different weight classes.
Right.
But even with these improvements, gloves can't entirely eliminate the risk of head trauma.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
So while gloves offered some protection,
right.
they couldn't solve the fundamental problem of blows to the head. What about other safety measures, like changes to the ring itself?
The ring has seen its own evolution in terms of size,
Okay.
padding, and construction.
Mm-hmm.
The modern ring is larger
Okay.
and has more padding than its predecessors,
Yeah.
which can help absorb some of the impact from falls.
Okay.
However, these improvements, while significant,
Yeah.
can't entirely prevent the kind of head trauma that can lead to serious injury or even death.
So it seems like there was a constant push and pull between the need for more safety
There was.
and the inherent nature of boxing.
Mhm.
Were there any other major developments in safety regulations during this time period?
Yes, the role of the referee became increasingly crucial.
Okay.
Referees gained more authority to stop fights, and there was greater emphasis on their responsibility to protect fighters from unnecessary harm.
Right.
This was a direct response to tragedies like the Campbell Bear fight,
Right.
where the referee's intervention came too late.
That's a critical change because it puts the focus on prevention
It does.
rather than just reacting to injuries.
Yeah.
What about medical advancements?
Yeah.
Did those play a role in improving fighter safety?
Medical advancements certainly played a role.
Okay.
Pre-fight medical evaluations became more rigorous,
Okay.
and ringside medical care improved. The understanding of head trauma, particularly the long-term effects of repeated blows,
Right.
began to evolve, which led to greater awareness of the risks involved.
This is where the concept of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, comes in, right?
Exactly.
This wasn't really understood in the early days of boxing.
The discovery of CTE, a degenerative brain disease,
Yeah.
found in individuals with a history of repeated head trauma, was a game changer.
Yeah.
It highlighted the long-term consequences of boxing,
Right.
going beyond the immediate risks of knockouts and serious injuries.
It must have been a shock to realize that the damage from boxing could extend far beyond the ring
It was.
and into the rest of a fighter's life.
It was a sobering realization. The science of CTE revealed that the cumulative effect of blows to the head, even those that didn't result in knockouts or obvious symptoms,
Right.
could have devastating consequences years or even decades later.
This makes the need for even more comprehensive safety measures even more urgent.
It does.
It's not just about preventing immediate tragedies in the ring,
Right.
but also about protecting fighters' long-term health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The understanding of CTE added a whole new dimension to the conversation about boxing safety.
Right.
It shifted the focus from acute injuries to the long-term health risks, forcing the boxing world to confront the potential for lasting damage, even in seemingly minor blows.
So we're seeing a gradual evolution of safety measures.
We are.
Gloves, ring construction, the referee's role, and a growing understanding of head trauma.
Right.
Did these changes have a noticeable impact on the number of fatalities in the sport?
They did have a positive impact,
Okay.
as safety regulations and medical understanding improved. The number of fatalities decreased.
Okay.
However, as we'll see,
Right.
the inherent risks of boxing, particularly the risk of head trauma, remained a significant challenge.
This brings us to a crucial question.
Okay.
How did the public perception of boxing change in light of these tragedies and the growing understanding of the risks involved? Was there a shift in how society viewed the sport?
The public's attitude towards boxing was undoubtedly influenced by these tragedies.
Yeah.
The romanticized image of the tough, resilient fighter
Right.
was increasingly challenged by the harsh realities of brain damage and death.
And this shift in perception wasn't just driven by individual tragedies, right?
It wasn't.
The media played a huge role in shaping public opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The media's coverage of boxing evolved over time.
Okay.
In the early days, there was a tendency to sensationalize the violence and focus on the spectacle.
Right.
But as tragedies continued
Yeah.
and the understanding of head trauma grew, the media began to take a more critical approach,
Okay.
highlighting the risks and ethical concerns surrounding the sport.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's hard to ignore the human cost when you're confronted with the devastating consequences of brain injuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The media played a critical role in bringing these issues to the forefront of public consciousness.
Right.
And as we'll see in the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
this shift in public perception led to further calls for reform and sparked a debate about the future of boxing itself.
It sounds like we're about to enter an era where the conversation about boxing safety becomes even more intense.
You're absolutely right. The tragedies, the evolving science, and the changing media landscape
Yeah.
all converged to create a perfect storm that forced the boxing world to confront its demons.
This has been an incredible journey so far.
It has.
We've seen how early tragedies led to the first steps towards safety regulations, how medical advancements changed the understanding of head trauma, and how the media played a role in shaping public perception.
Exactly.
But the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
We still have more ground to cover,
We do.
exploring how the sport grappled with these challenges
Yeah.
and how the conversation about boxing safety continues to evolve.
I'm looking forward to diving into those next chapters.
Yeah.
We'll uncover more stories, more turning points, and more
Yeah.
questions about the future of this complex and compelling sport.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As we move into the later part of the 20th century, the boxing world, it found itself at a crossroads.
Yeah.
The tragedies we discussed, along with the evolving understanding of head trauma,
Right.
really started to impact the sport's popularity.
It makes sense. It's hard to ignore the risks when you're seeing the long-term consequences play out.
Right.
Did this lead to any significant changes in the way boxing was regulated?
It absolutely did.
Okay.
This era saw a push for even stricter safety regulations. Pre-fight medical evaluations became even more comprehensive, including neurological exams and brain scans.
It seems like the medical community was starting to have a bigger influence on the sport.
Yes, the voice of medical professionals became louder,
Yeah.
and their expertise was increasingly sought after in developing safety protocols and guidelines.
Right.
This collaboration between the boxing world and the medical community was crucial in addressing the risks
Right.
associated with the sport.
So we're seeing a shift from simply reacting to tragedies
We are.
to a more proactive approach to prevention.
Yes.
Did this shift in focus have any impact on the types of injuries fighters were sustaining?
While the goal was to reduce all injuries,
Right.
the primary focus was on preventing head trauma. The long-term effects of repeated blows to the head were becoming more apparent, and there was a growing consensus that this was the most significant risk factor in boxing.
I remember you mentioned that ringside medical care also improved during this period.
Yes.
What specific changes were made, and how did they affect fighter safety?
Ringside medical teams became more specialized.
Okay.
They included not just general practitioners, but also neurologists
Right.
and trauma specialists equipped to handle head injuries more effectively.
Wow.
This meant quicker diagnosis and treatment,
Right.
which could be crucial in minimizing the severity of injuries.
It sounds like they were taking a more holistic approach to fighter safety,
They were.
addressing both the immediate and long-term risks.
Yeah.
Did these changes have a noticeable impact on the number of fatalities?
The stricter regulations, improved medical care, and heightened awareness did contribute to a decline in fatalities.
Okay.
However, as we know, the risk couldn't be eliminated entirely.
Which brings us to the tragic death of Jimmy Garcia in 1995.
Right.
This must have been a major setback for those working so hard to make boxing safer.
Garcia's death was a stark reminder that despite all the progress made,
Right.
boxing remained a dangerous sport.
Yeah.
It highlighted the fact that even with the best safety measures in place, the inherent risks couldn't be entirely mitigated.
It's a stark reminder that we're talking about human bodies,
We are.
and that even with the best intentions and precautions, tragic outcomes can still occur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Garcia's death sparked a renewed debate about the ethics of boxing.
Okay.
The question wasn't just about safety regulations,
Right.
but about the fundamental nature of a sport that involves deliberately inflicting blows to the head.
This is where the conversation starts to get really complex, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not just about tweaking the rules or improving medical care.
Right.
It's about grappling with the very essence of the sport.
You're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
This period saw a growing discussion about the responsibility of various stakeholders:
Okay.
fighters, trainers, promoters, medical professionals, and even the fans.
It really does take a village.
It does.
The conversation expanded beyond the ring
It did.
to encompass the cultural and societal implications of boxing.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the evolution of safety measures, but what about the fighters themselves? Did their training methods change in response to these growing concerns about head trauma?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was a shift in training philosophy towards a more defensive style,
Yep.
emphasizing head movement, blocking, and avoiding unnecessary blows.
So it wasn't just about becoming a better puncher,
It wasn't.
but also a smarter fighter, minimizing the risk of taking damaging blows.
Exactly.
Did this change in training approach have a noticeable effect on the frequency or severity of injuries?
It's hard to say for certain.
Yeah.
But anecdotally, many experts believe that the focus on defensive skills
Okay.
did help reduce the number of knockouts and head injuries.
Okay.
However, it's important to remember that every fighter is different,
Right.
and there are always variables that can influence the outcome of a fight.
That makes sense. It's a complex interplay of factors,
It is.
and there's no single solution that guarantees safety.
Right.
As we move into the 21st century, it seems like the awareness of CTE really started to take hold. Did this lead to any specific changes in how boxing was regulated?
You're right.
Yeah.
The science of CTE became more widely known, and this knowledge began to impact policy decisions.
Okay.
Some regulatory bodies started requiring more thorough neurological testing
All right.
and implemented stricter protocols for returning to fighting after a knockout.
So it wasn't just about preventing fatalities anymore.
It wasn't.
It was about protecting fighters' long-term health.
Exactly.
And recognizing the potential for lasting damage, even from seemingly minor blows.
Exactly.
This is significant evolution in how we think about safety in sports.
It is.
It's not just about avoiding immediate harm,
Right.
but also considering the long-term implications for an athlete's well-being.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
This shift in perspective represents a fundamental change in how we approach risk management in boxing and potentially in other sports as well.
It's a powerful testament to the influence of scientific research
It is.
and its ability to shape policy and public perception. But despite all this progress, tragedies continue to occur,
They did.
reminding us that the inherent risks of boxing are incredibly difficult to eliminate entirely.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The deaths of Daniel Aguillon in 2007,
Okay.
Levon Sargsyan in 2011, Mike Towell in 2016,
Right.
and most recently, Patrick Day in 2019,
Yeah.
underscored the fact that boxing remains a dangerous sport, even in the modern era.
These tragedies must have been incredibly disheartening for those who had dedicated so much time and effort to improving safety in the sport.
They were devastating losses,
Yeah.
and they sparked a wave of soul-searching within the boxing community.
Right.
People questioned whether enough was being done,
Right.
whether the sport could ever be truly safe,
Right.
and whether the inherent risks outweighed the potential rewards.
It's a complex dilemma with no easy answers.
It is.
Boxing is a sport with a long and rich history,
It is.
but it's also a sport that carries inherent dangers.
Right.
The challenge is to find a way to balance the traditions and values of boxing with the need to protect the health and well-being of the athletes.
That's the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
It's about finding a way to honor the sport's legacy
Right.
while acknowledging the realities of brain trauma and the potential for serious injury. The conversation is ongoing, and it involves a delicate balance of perspectives and priorities.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the bare-knuckle era to the modern age.
We have.
We've seen how boxing has grappled with its own inherent dangers,
Right.
how safety measures have evolved,
Yeah.
and how the understanding of head trauma has reshaped the conversation about the sport.
It has.
But as we move into the future,
Yeah.
there are still many questions to consider.
There are.
Can boxing ever be truly safe? What is the responsibility of the various stakeholders? And how do we balance the traditions of the sport with the need to protect the athletes?
Those are the critical questions we'll continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
The future of boxing hinges on finding answers that respect the sport's history. Right.
While prioritizing the well-being of those who step into the ring.
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking exploration of boxing's complex relationship with safety.
It has.
We've seen the evolution of rules, the advancements in medical understanding, and the ongoing debate about the ethics of the sport.
Right.
But the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
There's still much to learn and discuss.
There is.
And I'm eager to see how the boxing world continues to navigate these challenges. We've journeyed through over a century of boxing history,
We have.
tracing the evolution of safety measures and the growing awareness of the sport's inherent risks.
Right.
But as we look to the future, a crucial question remains. What will it take to truly protect the fighters?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen how boxing has responded to tragedies with rule changes
Right.
and advancements in medical care. But the fundamental nature of the sport,
Right.
the fact that it involves inflicting blows to the head,
Makes complete elimination of risk incredibly difficult.
it feels like we're at this crossroads where we have to reconcile the sport's history and its cultural significance
Right.
with the very real and often devastating consequences of those risks.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Some people believe that boxing should be banned outright, arguing that no amount of regulation can truly make a sport that targets the brain safe.
I can understand that viewpoint. It's hard to argue with the evidence of long-term brain damage and the potential for fatalities.
Right.
But then there's the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
The argument that boxing provides opportunities and a unique pathway for some individuals, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds.
That's a crucial part of the conversation.
Yeah.
For many, boxing is more than just a sport. It's a
Right.
discipline, a community,
Yeah.
and a way to overcome adversity. It's a source of personal empowerment and a path to achieving goals that might otherwise seem impossible.
So how do we reconcile these seemingly opposing perspectives? Is there a way to preserve the positive aspects of boxing
Right.
while minimizing the inherent risks?
It's a complex challenge, and
Yeah.
there's no easy solution.
Right.
I think the answer lies in a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
We need to continue to refine safety regulations,
Okay.
ensure rigorous medical evaluations,
Right.
and invest in research to better understand and mitigate the long-term effects of head trauma.
It sounds as we need to be proactive rather than reactive,
We do.
anticipating risks and developing strategies to address them before tragedies occur.
Absolutely.
What else can be done to create a safer environment for fighters?
Education is paramount.
Okay.
Fighters need to be fully informed about the risks they're taking.
Right.
And they need to be equipped with the knowledge and skills to protect themselves both inside and outside the ring. This includes understanding proper training techniques,
Okay.
recognizing the signs of concussion,
Right.
and seeking medical attention when necessary.
So it's not just about physical safety,
It's not.
but also about empowering fighters to make informed decisions about their own health and well-being.
It is.
It seems like there's a growing emphasis on personal responsibility within the sport.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The conversation about safety can't just be about rules and regulations.
Right.
It needs to include a focus on individual accountability and a shared commitment to creating a culture of safety within the boxing community.
This brings up an interesting question.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the roles of fighters, trainers, and medical professionals.
Right?
But what about the fans?
Yeah.
Do they have a responsibility in this conversation about boxing safety?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Fans are a vital part of the boxing ecosystem,
Right.
and their voices matter. They can demand greater transparency from promoters,
Okay.
support fighters who prioritize safety,
Right.
and advocate for policies that protect athletes' health.
It sounds like we're talking about a collective effort, a shared responsibility to protect the fighters and ensure the future of the sport.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture of respect and responsibility that extends beyond the ring and permeates every aspect of the boxing world.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for
It
me.
has been for me, too.
We've covered so much ground,
We have.
from the brutal bare-knuckle era to the ongoing debate about the future of the sport. It's clear that boxing has a complex and, at times, tragic history.
It does.
But it's also a sport that has shown a capacity for change and a willingness to confront its own demons.
It has.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What's the next chapter in boxing's story?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
I believe the future of boxing depends on our collective commitment to safety, transparency, and accountability.
Right.
We need to continue to push for reforms, invest in research,
Yeah.
and foster a culture of respect and responsibility that puts the well-being of the fighters above all else.
And perhaps most importantly, we need to continue the conversation.
We do.
This deep dive has only scratched the surface of a complex and multifaceted issue,
Yeah,
and there's still much to learn and discuss.
there is.
I encourage everyone listening to delve deeper into the history of boxing safety, to stay informed about the latest developments,
You're right.
and to engage in thoughtful dialogue about the future of the sport.
Absolutely.
The decisions we make today will shape the boxing world of tomorrow.
They will.
And we all have a role to play in ensuring that the sport's legacy is one of progress,
Right.
innovation, and a genuine commitment to protecting the athletes who step into the ring.
Couldn't have said it better myself.